I know all of you that are here with us so far this evening are quite familiar with Wallace Pierson Travel, formerly the travel agency. Been around since 1974, and in 1996, Jim and Angie were smart enough to join a really amazing consortium called Virtuoso. We are all about the relationships. Virtuoso is as well, and luckily the amazing Silversea Cruises is part of this fantastic organization as well. And it really does not only strengthen the relationships, but it gives a lot of added value and just a sense of security and that type of thing when it comes to travel. So tonight we are fortunate enough to not only have our amazing John Wilson, who many people have met before at our client events. We also have Joe with us, that is their Vice President of Sales, and Carl is their guru of expedition travel. And we're going to get some really great talking points and make all of us just drool for what's about to happen in the next few months, hopefully. So with that, Joe, we'll go ahead and let you get started, please, sir.
Yep, thanks. Thanks, Angela. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time of your busy day. I know it's a beautiful day in Florida, so those of you that are Floridians, thanks for taking time out of this beautiful evening. Wanted to share a very important message with you in a very strange time. I never thought after 26 years in this business that I'd see the day where all of our fleets are laid up and idle. Never ever thought that we'd ever get to that point, but here we are. Here we are. All the fleets are up and they're idle, but we are planning. We're planning, and we're planning for the year ahead. We are continuing with our port planning and our itinerary planning well into 22 and beyond. So we're working hard with the authorities to make sure that we can return to sea safely and do so as quickly as possible. I'll share with you some updates that we've been doing throughout the fleet, but before we get into that, I want to talk to you about our brand and who we are as a company and how we identify ourselves and how we'd like to really relate to you and have you identify us. And we're a cruise line, so that means we take folks to destinations, but the truth is we go to more destinations than any cruise line out there, more than double. Silversea travels to 1,000 different ports of call in the calendar year. And it's not just the sheer number of ports that we take you to, it's how we call on these ports. And it's I think part of the reason why the folks at Wallace Pierson like us so much is we do offer these unique port experiences and these destination experiences. And no better way for me to explain that than to show you this picture of the wind going through the Tower Bridge. And when we sail on the small ships out of London, this is your experience. You will tie up to the Belfast, and you will sail through the Tower Bridge on your way out and on your way back to London. And when we sail into St. Petersburg, we dock at the downtown embankment, the English embankment, just outside of the Hermitage. We sail into Seville instead of busing you over from Cadiz, and many, 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 many different examples throughout the world, and even in the main commercial ports where the big ships are forced to call on the commercial ports or the big industrial ports, or they're just simply not making the investment in that in-town, downtown immersion. Which is very much a part of our focus. So when you think of Silversea, definitely think of us as the destination leaders in all cruise lines. We sail to all 7 continents. We're one of the very few that do it. We sail in this beautiful classic platform, cruising as you come to love it, in a luxury platform with all suites, all ocean views, all butler service, and then of course, most included on board. But then we venture off to these really remote places like the Arctic or the Antarctic and the Galapagos, and even into places like the Russian Far East. Really, really exciting, off the beaten path places. These things together make us the destination leader in cruising. And when you think of how we call on these ports, I mentioned it before, we want to go and put you downtown every opportunity we can, even if that means we have to invest a little more. We know it's so very important to what it was that interests you most. Ships are nice, food is nice, but I hope you pick me over my competitor for those things. But the reason you called our friends at Wallace Pierson was because there's a place in the world you want to go learn about. And we can't lose focus of that, and that's very much a big part of how we plan our itineraries and a big part of what Carl's going to discuss with you here today in detail on our expedition products. So with destination being the focus, we have to take you there somehow, and we take you there with the best luxury fleet at sea. And I don't say that because they pay me to, I say that because we really, really mean it. We have got some of the most beautiful vessels and some of the newest vessels sailing the ocean. We have 5 classic ships in our classic fleet, what we call classic cruising. And then we have 4 expedition ships with the newest, the delivery of the Silver Origin, who will be sailing in the Galapagos Islands, and she will be doing 7-night itineraries round trip from the Galapagos every Saturday. This combined brings us, it gives us the largest luxury fleet at sea today, and again, gets us access to the world and all of those great and beautiful remote places that we talked about. And when you talk about comfort and what we do when we open it up, you know, you look at these 600 passenger vessels, like the Silver Spirit, or even the 296 Silver Wind, far different, a big difference in sizes, but one thing that they have in common is this tremendous sense of space as you walk through the vessels. You know, 600 passengers on 40,000 gross registered tons. For you as a consumer, sounds like a big number. For us in the industry, it means that you have a lot of space to yourself and a lot of space to share with your fellow passengers. So exclusivity is definitely a hallmark of our brand and something that you can expect when you board our ships. Although we carry few people, we bring you large hardware in comparison. And when you talk about what sets us apart from some of the other cruise lines out there, you know, in particular on the premium side of things, we sail with a lot less people. A premium cruise line with the tonnage of the Silver Spirit would carry 1,250 passengers, where the Spirit's going to carry 608. And I can tell you that having half the occupancy on the same tonnage, it's a big difference in your overall experience and how you get to enjoy that vessel, and quite frankly, how you feel about the space personally. Our customers feel like our ships are their home, and some of them, it is their home. They spend so much time on board, but it's because we go to great lengths to make sure that they feel so welcome and comfortable. The 900 destinations sets us apart from everyone else, and then I think our marketing team did a really good job of explaining what service levels really mean with this image down here. It's a statistic that we in the business always try to convey to our customers. It's kind of hard to bring it across, but this picture here really, it shows what interruptions and how much better the service is when you have the higher passenger to crew ratios. Look how many people have to get their first course before you can get your second, or move on even to your third. So think about that when speaking to our friends at Wallace Pierson about your next vacation option. And if you're not traveling in luxury, think about it, because there are options out there that we know are available to you and that can take you to the destinations you want to go to next. And of course, room size. Our standard and smallest suite is 376 square feet. So I think it's safe to say it's not so bad if that's as bad as it gets. And when it comes to dining options on board, really want to open up the ship. And again, variety, options, space, that's what we're about. And when you look at the options here on the new builds with the Silver Muse that we introduced in 2017, we went away from the standard dining format with the main dining room. Instead, we gave you 8 different dining options to choose from. And I can tell you this format has been very, very well received.
And
so
one other thing with the dining,
yeah, go ahead.
With there's 596 guests on the ship. There's actually 820 seats available for dining. So again, with social distancing, it's very easy and natural on our ships to be able to do that in the future as well, because there's so many extra seats already built in.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And the reason it's a great segue into this next photo, and it's sorry for the poor quality. If marketing saw me using this, they'd kill me. But the reason I have this photo here is to talk to you about what we're doing now with our product. How are we reacting to the current situation? What are we doing on board to make sure that we provide you, our customers, the safest environment? And here is a picture of our ships in April in Tenerife. We've got the Spirit, the Whisper or Shadow, 388 passengers here. There's the Small Wind, and then the leftover of the Whisper Shadow equation on the end over here. And what we were able to do in Tenerife for the entire month of April is we moved crew members between the ships. And what we were doing was we were fully occupying the passenger cabins and simulating real life on board. We had full occupancy on the passenger side. We had full occupancy on the crew side on all 4 of these vessels, which represent the biggest sizes we have across the 9 ships. And that was, we were able to simulate dining, the big draw events like the captain's cocktail night. How do we do entertainment? Should we consider closing the casino? Where can we put in plexiglass to keep customer and crew safe, but not interfere with personal interactions that, you know, are such an important part of our experience? And I could tell you the crew worked really hard. I definitely would have wanted to be part of the passenger equation. I'm sure some of our customers did a good job of channeling some of our best customers. But what we uncovered and what we reminded ourselves, folks, is when it comes to social distancing and this concept of space and this idea of space, what we found through this exercise, and we reminded ourselves that space is the most basic promise we make any of you. We're a luxury cruise line. And with a luxury cruise line comes exclusivity, and exclusivity on a cruise ship means space. And that's what we're built on. And this was a good reminder to us that we are going to be able to put measures in place to keep people safely apart, and it will not interfere with your experience too much. Will we require you to wear masks? No. I'm not sure what the CDC is going to require us to require you to do, but that's not our plan. Our housekeeping staff will have PPE and will be wearing masks and gloves, but our guests will not be required to. They'll be available upon request. But I want you to know that we're going to great lengths right now to simulate life on board so that we can make sure that we are ready to set sail when these provisions and when these requirements are put forth. Right now, the CDC has not given us what those are. We're waiting patiently for what they are, but we feel that we're going to be pretty well ready to go because we've anticipated a lot of this and we've done a lot of homework and a lot of work in the background to make sure that we're ready to go when the time comes. And the one thing you probably did not expect out of the luxury equation was the word value. And it's something that very much holds up with luxury cruising, maybe not so much in other luxury industries, but when you're talking about luxury cruising and you think about all the things that we include, value is definitely not only an appropriate part of the conversation, a very important one. And when you add up all the things that we include versus where you may be sailing now on other lines that aren't all inclusive, value certainly holds up. And those of you that are currently sailing with us or other luxury lines know that this is a very important part and a very real part of your purchase, and something that we all feel good about when we go. You know, I always say it's a different holiday to have the constant reminder that you're still paying for it with every passing day. When you get to sit down and enjoy it as you see fit and as you envision without the reminder that you're still paying for it, without having to reach into your pocket, it becomes a completely different experience. So those of you that aren't sailing in luxury yet, I ask you, please call our friends at Wallace Pierson because they know exactly what ships will be good for you. And with that, I want to introduce our new ship, the Silver Moon. She'll be coming in August. And before I want to say thank you all for your attention, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Carl, who's going to take it from here and bring you all into the world of expedition. Carl?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for your time. So thanks again, Joe. The big difference here with expedition, or I think what we'll talk about, is what expedition cruising is and how it differs from what you would call classic cruising, and how we do it differently. And we'll touch on a couple of the key destinations. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about Antarctica, the Arctic, and the Galapagos. So just to give you a bit of background, this is my passion. This is my focus. I've been doing this sort of adventure and expedition travel for over 30 years. This was at the North Pole in 2015. And this is in the first time in Antarctica in 2002.
With a glass of scotch, notice.
Yes, yes. Well, what else should you do when you get to the seventh continent? Your seventh continent. You have to toast yourself and toast your achievement.
It's when all your senses become aware. You're present, in focus. That's traveling to me. It's an urgent need to go and observe this world that we all share. A ray of light, a pair of eyes that tell a story, an instant of perfection. Images printing on your soul. This is authentic beauty. It's all out there, and trust me, there's always room for discovery. You just gotta stay curious.
So sorry to show you another map, but to highlight Joe's point about being all about destination, this map will show you the difference though between expedition and classic. So all the little white dots are where we visit with the classic fleet, and all the red ones are places that we visited and will visit on the expedition fleet. So of the over 900, I believe it was 570 last year that were on the classic fleet. So well over half, excuse me, on the expedition fleet. So well over half. And you know, Joe talked a fair bit about the size of the vessels. One of the things that really sets the expedition fleet apart, first of all, the guest capacity on the expedition fleet ranges from 100 guests to 240. And you can see the three vessels currently. Actually, this slide is a little bit dated. We're currently the Silver Explorer, the Silver Cloud. We just took possession of the Silver Origin last week, and she will soon replace the Silver Galapagos in the Galapagos, sailing exclusively there. And we should have her there for late August, I think, because we hope to start sailing August 22nd. We'll see how things go in Ecuador. And then at some point, we will refurbish the Silver Wind and convert her into an expedition vessel as well. So in addition to being very small in terms of their guest capacity, ranging from 100 to 240, these vessels also have very, very shallow drafts. And as a result, we can get into places that are difficult, if not impossible, to do on your own, and we can get to those 570 destinations. So what is expedition cruising and how does it differ? It's taking that luxury platform that Joe's been talking about with the all-inclusive aspect and the all-inclusive lifestyle, and this holds true for the expedition fleet as well. It's not just on the classic fleet, it carries over. And using that ship as a platform to then go and explore, and using these Zodiacs that you see the guests in, these rigid inflatable boats, to really get off of the ship and start exploring. So I think we've got places like, for example, the Darien Gap in Central America. Yeah, so this will be in Panama. And then we've got sea kayaking in the Arctic, and visiting a remote beach in Iceland somewhere. And even if you did Iceland by yourself and rented a car and went around the ring road, you wouldn't be able to get to a place like this. So again, places that are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get to on your own. And then next we've got the Russian Far East. So across the Bering Sea from Alaska and getting over to the Kamchatka Peninsula, Chukotka, and something, and I learned that, and then we're on to the Galapagos, and something that all of these places have in common is you couldn't buy a t-shirt here if you wanted to. There are no t-shirt shops. You're on your own. You're out in the middle of nowhere. Next one's Galapagos. And very often we're the only ones out here. I think we're then into Madagascar on a hike or on a little
Carl,
trail.
talk about the Galapagos for just a second. When we pulled into the island, we're the only ship in those islands on that, right?
Yeah. So the Galapagos it's highly regulated. So the National Park Service of the Galapagos dictates where we can go, what day we're allowed to go there, what we're allowed to do when we get there. And they also limit it to any one of these beaches or landing sites or boardwalks to 100 people a day. So there are smaller vessels operating in the Galapagos, but it's a very popular destination. So you can find that even though you think you're on a vessel with 16 or 24 or 40 people, you can arrive at one of these sites where you're going off on a hike and walking on a boardwalk or snorkeling off the beach, but there may be 3 other vessels there because collectively there's allowed to be 100 guests. Because we have 100 guests, when we arrive, we're the only vessel there. So still the same number of people ashore, it just feels different because if you pull into this place and there are already 3 other vessels at anchor, you don't feel like you've got that exclusivity that Joe touched on. And it's that sense of exclusivity that really feels different. And on the next slide, you'll get a sense for that as well. This is a remote beach in Borneo, so in Indonesia. And it's rare that we'll see another vessel around here. It's rare that we'll see a community. And when we do, we're the only ones there. But yeah, no other vessels around. And we're very often the only ones in some of these remote locations. So I said that I'd touch on some of the 3 of the destinations. It's kind of the 80-20 rule. We offer a lot of expedition destinations, the Russian Far East, the Kimberley coast of Australia, Papua New Guinea, anywhere water touches land, but I would say about 80% of our guest capacity, or the number of people that travel with us on expedition, do so in these 3 destinations: Antarctica, the Arctic, and the Galapagos. So the next slide will give you a bit of a geography refresher as to what we're talking about when we're talking about Antarctica. It's a frozen continent surrounded by oceans, and that's in direct contrast and literally the polar opposite of the Arctic, and I'll show you that in a minute. What's interesting about when you look at this map and you see the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, so just underneath where it says Falkland Islands on the map, that's the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. That's the first part of Antarctica to thaw in the spring, and it's the last part of Antarctica to freeze in the winter. And as a result, you get huge congregations of wildlife going there because they've got a very, very short season as it is to meet and mate and raise their chicks and fledge the chicks and get the heck out of Dodge before it freezes over again. So the season is extended by a couple of weeks by going here. The lucky coincidence is how close the tip of that peninsula is to the southern tip of South America. And that's where we depart from a little city in Argentina called Ushuaia to get down to the peninsula. So that those 2 sort of flukes of geography are what make it a wonderful place to visit. So this image I love because, again, it gives you a really good sense of how small the vessel is from a draft perspective. This is how close we're arriving. I think when people hear about the Zodiac excursions, they're thinking, oh, we're going to have to spend 15 or 20 minutes on the Zodiac to get across or get from the vessel to the landing. And typically it's not more than 5 minutes. And on the next one, you'll get a sense for that as well. When we land, it's not expedition light. Just because we are a small ship luxury cruise line, we're not doing this in a sort of tamed or dumbed down version of it. We're right in the thick of things. This is true expedition. So if you look at this beach and all the activity that's going on here, this is a colony of king penguins on a place called Salisbury Plain on South Georgia Island. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of penguins heading into the water, hundreds coming out of the water. Wherever there are penguins, there are leopard seals and there are orcas, because every one of those penguins represents a snack to a leopard seal or to an orca. So there's a lot going on. And on the next slide, you'll see just how when we land, we are literally right there among the penguins. This is our welcoming committee. Lots of guidelines that you'll be told about in terms of how close and you're allowed to get to the wildlife, but the penguins don't read those guidelines and they don't follow those instructions, and they will very often waddle right up to you, and they're very inquisitive, particularly this year's chicks, and they'll tug on your waterproof pants, or they'll tug on your boots, or they will tug on your backpack straps or your camera straps. So you can get a lot closer to them. It's a really, really beautiful experience. These guys, the kings, are the second largest of the penguin species. Only the emperors are larger, and these stand about 3 feet tall. This place, Salisbury Plain on South Georgia, this particular colony is 60,000 birds. So depending on how the wind is blowing, we smell this place long before we arrive at it. And then we hear it. Because if you can imagine 60,000 birds all squawking at each other, and the chicks, the big fluffy ones, they're the ones that are waiting to be fed. So they're very, very vocal. Typically a landing at the peninsula would look like this. And some people are concerned about how fit do I have to be to do an expedition, or specifically an Antarctic expedition. If this is as much as you want to do, this is a nice flat landing, and you didn't want to do much more than this, you certainly wouldn't have to. Lots of expedition team members there to help you in and out of the Zodiac, and a great gear list, and we provide just about all of the gear to help you get in and out, and because sometimes there may be a wet landing, but to help you with the cold. And if this is as much as you wanted to do, that's fine. A nice level area to walk around on. Go spend some time with the onboard ornithologist or marine biologist or glaciologist, and they'll bring it to life. They're the ones who talk it all up and can tell you about the life cycle of the Adelie penguin. But if you wanted to do something a little more active, you grab a set of trekking poles and take off. And again, on the Cloud, for example, we've got 28 expedition staff members. So we can certainly afford to have some of them take off and go with some of the guests and do something a little more active, and take off for a couple of hours and go do a big hike and go climb to the top of that hill and see what's on the other side, and go take a look at the glacier and the icebergs on the other side. And while one group is doing that, I mentioned that in the Galapagos, there's a national park regulation that restricts us having no more than 100 people ashore at a time. That's true in Antarctica as well. So there's a governing body called IATO, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, that Silversea belongs to. And we self-govern, we self-regulate. So while 100 guests are ashore and visiting the penguin colonies, we take the other group of people. So on the Silver Explorer, for example, with 144 guests, we might have 70 and 70. So 70 are ashore and 70 would be what we call Zodiac cruising. And it's a way to get that much closer to the wildlife. Imagine the perspective now. You're only about 4 or 5 feet off the water. You're getting closer to some of the other wildlife. You'll see the penguins, but not as much. Once they're in the water, as awkward as they are on land, they become extremely graceful in the water. You won't see them. They're super fast and they can dive very, very deep. But you might see seals. In the next slide, you'll see whales. And it's just a great perspective for photography. You're closer to the icebergs, you're closer to the glaciers. You can get those big landscape shots from the water level. So after about 2 hours or so of doing that, one group on land, one group in the Zodiacs, then we'll switch places. And again, another 1.5 to 2 hours, and then head back to the ship. And that's a morning. Back on the ship for lunch. The ship might navigate to a different location, and then we'll switch places and do it all over again. So 2 landings a day and 2 Zodiac cruisings a day, typically weather conditions and ice conditions permitting. And for those who want to do something, again, a little more strenuous or a little more active, sea kayaking. And whenever we offer sea kayaking, whether it's in the Galapagos, in the Arctic, or in Antarctica, it's complimentary. So 8 tandem sea kayaks, we can get 16 people out at a time. So on a good day, we can get 64 people out sea kayaking. There's always 2 kayak guides, and you'll see the red kayaks. Those are solo kayaks. That's where the kayak guides are. The next one, please, Joe. And you can see the red kayaks. Those are the kayak guides. And just off the screen, there's a Zodiac. If anyone got cold or tired, they just raise their hands, and the Zodiac could always pick them up and take them back to the ship. But talk about perspective. Now you're 3 feet off the water, and that whale that has just dived in the lower right-hand corner, imagine where it's going to resurface and look which direction the kayaks are headed. So there's about to be a very, very interesting encounter. So it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And again, complimentary whenever we offer it. And the other experience that some people choose to do, I have to ask the Wallace Pierson clan, how many people did the polar plunge? Angie. Oh, you might all be muted, sorry. Angie did it? What about the kids?
They had to go. We had to go if they went, so they didn't get to go. They got to do the polar plunge. They got to do the polar plunge in your swimming pool.
Okay. Not the same thing.
So the polar plunge, it's funny because about 90% of the guests at the beginning of the cruise say they will not do this, and about 50% end up doing it. And I attribute it to the fact that there's a butler standing just inside that doorway there with a tray full of vodka shots. Which is a weird enticement because it's all inclusive. So it doesn't matter that the butler is giving away free vodka.
When I went on the Arctic, and during the polar plunge, I said, I'm not doing it. And I didn't do it. But you could stand right above where they were doing it. And there was a father with 2 boys, and one boy went with another gentleman because you do it in tandem. And then the other son, the younger one, who was about 8, went with the father. And when he got down to the platform, he looked back, he said, Mommy said I could change my mind, and I'm changing it, and ran right back.
And then I think our next slide is of some special guests in Antarctica.
There we go.
Yeah, do you guys want to speak to this a little bit?
Sure. This was when we made our first actual landing on the continent of Antarctica. It was a couple of days into the trip. And of course, as you can see from the ginormous grins, we were very excited to be there. And we did make our way all the way up. You can't even see all the way up on this shot. But we were tiny little red dots in the background, just like up there. And we got to watch glaciers calve from up there. And we got to watch the penguin highways. And we saw eggs that the skua had stolen from a nest and dropped. The girls got to hold. And we heard amazing tales the whole entire way up and back again from the naturalists that were stationed to make sure we made it safely and easily all the way up and down, and it was absolutely magnificent.
Fun.
Looks amazing.
Very cool.
And this was the 7th continent for everybody.
Oh, that's really special. Especially the kids. How old are the kids again?
They were 7 and 9 there. They are now 8, and the big one turned 10 this week.
Wow.
Seventh continent. Wow.
That's awesome.
What an
So
experience.
before that first decade, they
Congratulations.
made all 7 continents. Very
Congratulations.
That's great.
Took me till I was 40.
Yeah.
And Angela says, as we're going ashore on the Zodiac, she looked at me with huge eyes and said, "Ma, I've been waiting all my life to do."
Okay, so switching gears, the Arctic, so the geography lesson again. The Arctic, where Antarctica is a frozen continent surrounded by oceans, the Arctic is a frozen ocean surrounded by continents. And there's a couple of very significant differences between the two, other than the geography and obviously being at extremes of the globe. Where Antarctica is most logically accessed from Argentina, just because of its proximity to the Antarctic Peninsula that I mentioned. In the Arctic, when we take expeditions up here, we can access from Greenland, from Canada, from Alaska, from the Russian Far East, from not so much from Finland and Sweden, although they are considered Arctic nations, but from Norway, plenty of voyages from Norway. So accessible from that many more places, and very, very different in each one of those regions. It's a very, very different experience to see the Russian Arctic than it is to see Greenland, and a very different experience to see Svalbard, which is an archipelago of islands in the northern part of Norway, halfway between Norway and the North Pole, than to see the Canadian Arctic. So it's a very, very, I think a lot of people sort of say the Arctic as this catch-all, but it's very, very different depending on where you're going. The other significant difference is how we use the vessel. So in order to go to the polar regions, the vessels have to be ice classed. They have to have a high enough ice class that allows us to go in there and go into places like this where we're pushing the ice aside. Because as opposed to Antarctica, that colony, or the photograph that I showed that has that colony of 60,000 king penguins, we know that those penguins will return to that same place year after year after year. They will leave in the winter or the coming of winter because it'll completely ice over. They'll head somewhere more ice-free, and then they will come back in the spring and they will steal pebbles from each other to make their nests, and they will lay their eggs, and they will sit on their eggs and hatch their chicks and do all of that, and they will come back year after year after year. In the Arctic, it's kind of like being on a safari, because we have no idea what we're going to see, when we're going to see it, or where we're going to see it. We're hoping we're going to see pods of belugas, and we're hoping we're going to see pods of narwhal, and maybe a great big group of walrus as they've hauled out onto some rocks. If we're really lucky, some polar bears, some reindeer running along the coast, or even some Arctic foxes. But we just don't know when or if or where we're going to see any of those things. So it's by using the high ice class of the ship that allows us to penetrate deep into these fjords and these bays and these inlets to go looking and to go on, again, to borrow that word, safari. So it's quite different. Just like in Antarctica and you'll see in the Galapagos, again, sea kayaking, a great experience, completely complimentary. You've got the sea kayak guide there in the red kayak, and they're just sort of coaching people a little bit on, don't get much closer than this, or let's head over that way, or look at that crab eater seal just jumped up. Here's a little bit of information about that species. So a great
Carl,
experience.
they're all wearing survival suits, so they won't freeze right away, right?
No, and you're active, right? Because you're constantly moving your paddle, so you're staying warm.
That's right.
Did any of you paddle sea kayaking in Antarctica?
We did not.
Nope. Okay.
Now I'm surprised. You're letting me down here.
We did think about it a couple of times, Angie and I did, but it was actually a pretty windy experience. Not necessarily huge waves, but just a little bit windier than we didn't want to be that cold. We're Floridian.
Yep.
Okay.
I hear you. But you can see sometimes the conditions are absolutely idyllic, and what a great experience again. The other thing about the Arctic, the similar, staying in that vein, we just never know. A lot of people will ask about what time of year do I go to see the Northern Lights? It's not so much about the time of year, although that's significant. The Northern Lights are one of those atmospheric phenomena. We just never know if it's even going to happen. And if it does, you need clear skies and you need darkness. So it's all about going in with this great sense of adventure and just going into the unknown willingly. This happened around 1 o'clock in the morning. So couple of expedition team members had a very, very short discussion. Do we wake the guests up? Well, of course you wake the guests up, because if they find out tomorrow morning at breakfast that this happened and they weren't woken up and they weren't told about it, there's going to be trouble. The next couple of slides show the Northern Lights as well, and it's absolutely beautiful. So, a quick PA announcement by the expedition leader. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we know it's 1 o'clock in the morning, but there's something that we think you want to see. So put your complimentary red parkas on over your pajamas, put your big boots on, and come up to the observation deck, because we think this is something you want to see. And no one complains about it. The next shot is another video, Joe, so we can, oh, sorry, my mistake.
Bears? Yep.
Nope, yeah. After, I think the next 3 are polar bears, and then a video that we can gloss over. So just like the Northern Lights, we don't know if, when, or where we're going to see bears. Be wary of anyone promising you polar bears. That's kind of like going to Alaska and promising people they're going to get good fishing. You just never know. So sometimes we do have a good track record. Sometimes we see them from further away, and sometimes we see them from a little bit closer. We try not to chase them. We don't want them to feel like they're constantly being stalked by us. So we'll try to stay a respectful distance away from them, and just observe and see where they're headed, and see how long we can use the zodiacs to sort of track them, if you will, and see what they're up to. And if you've never seen them in the wild, it'll bring a tear to your eye when you do. John, this is you. This is me.
I just want to tell you, I did the Arctic. I absolutely loved it. I've also been to the Galapagos. And, you take one, I'm not exactly the outdoors type, would be the best way to put it, but I love these type of cruises. This is Silversea truly at its finest, because you are, quote unquote, roughing it. But see, this is my idea of roughing it. We were on a Zodiac, and another Zodiac pulled up, and it was a Zodiac full of the butlers with champagne and chocolate covered strawberries. And literally, this is the 4th day of seeing no one. We're nearly at the top of the world. Again, it's just a great experience. So again, you get everything, including the pure luxury of Silversea. That's what makes it so special.
And then the Galapagos, so the 3rd of the big 3, and I with tongue firmly planted in cheek, I call this one the gateway drug to expedition. It's Ecuador. It's easy to get to. It's a 3.5-hour flight to Quito from Miami. Anywhere in North America is a 1, maybe 2-hour time zone difference at most. Tourism is a huge part of the Ecuadorian economy. The currency is pegged 1-to-1 with the US dollar, and we've all heard about the Galapagos since we were kids. So it's easy to get to. It's very casual when you get there. I would say it's our most casual ship and our most casual destination. Where dining is concerned, and again, these are small luxury ships, but where dining is concerned, the only guideline or the only regulation, if you will, on this one is that no jeans in the main dining room at dinner. So we do ask for sort of country club casual or resort wear. But if you were to stay at the grill for dinner, put on a light sweater or a light jacket for dinner outside, you could stay in shorts and sandals if you wanted to. A lot of people will pull their hair out wondering which of the two itineraries to do. They're interested in the Galapagos and they'll start looking and they'll say, well, they've got a Western itinerary and they've got a North and Central itinerary, but which one should we do? And they'll go to their travel advisor at Wallace Pierson and they'll say, yes, but which one? I don't want to miss anything. The great thing is the main species that most people are curious about and sort of the iconic species that you'll go to the Galapagos for. The blue-footed boobies, the frigate birds, the one in the lower right corner there with the big red pouch, the sea lions, the giant tortoises, and the marine iguanas. You'll see those in abundance on both itineraries, and I'll guarantee that you see both of them. So it really comes down to the time of year. And or if you're a birder or a naturalist and you're very, very keen on a particular species, then we can sort of coach you on what time of year to go, because this and this is happening on this island. So when the sea turtles are hatching, for example, then we'll say, okay, so you probably want to look at the Western itinerary then, and you want to go between May and November to catch that. So then you can get into that discussion. But for the vast majority of people who will say, listen, I've got a window of opportunity to go traveling between here and here. Is it a good time to go to the Galapagos? It's always a good time to go. You're 2 degrees from the equator. So the average water temperature changes by, I think, 7 degrees from the coldest time of year to the warmest time of year. And the average air temperature changes by 13 degrees Fahrenheit from the coldest time of year to the warmest time of year. So we can move forward a couple, Joe. Thank you. And here you get a sense, sorry, if you just go back to that weather chart, you can see there 83. So if you go early in the year, February, March, April, it's going to be a bit hot and muggy. If you don't want that and you want to go when it's a little bit cooler, August, September, October, it's just 70 or low 70s. And again, you can see the water temperature. It's coldest in August at 70 and warmest in February, March, and April at 77. So a 7-degree temperature difference. We'll talk about snorkeling in a minute, and don't worry about that 70-degree water temperature. You Floridians, I know you're all going to get in a panic about 70 degrees. For me, I'm Canadian. I live in Toronto. That's a bathtub for us. That's beautiful. What's one of the things that's unique in the Galapagos from our perspective, or from the perspective of the expedition team, is that they are all citizens of the Galapagos. They all have to have permanent residency in the Galapagos. So they're all Galapagueños. And this is something that the Galapagos National Park Service has dictated or mandated. And it's a way that we employ the local people. It's one of the most coveted jobs in the Galapagos. We're creating employment in the Galapagos, and we're leaving some of the money in the Galapagos as well, which is great. And the Galapagos National Park Service does that in a few other ways as well. So these folks typically will go to the mainland, Ecuador, and they'll get a graduate degree or an undergraduate degree, biology, marine biology, ornithology, could be in geology because the islands are quite interesting. They're volcanic. And then they'll come back to the islands and they'll take a mandatory 5-month training program that's operated by the Galapagos National Park Service. And that's how they become generalists. And then they are the ones who bring it to life. We go ashore in small groups, 8 to 10 people per Zodiac, with one of the expedition leaders or one of the expedition staff, the Galapagos National Park Service guides, and they bring it to life. They are the ones who will take you on the trails, and you might spend 2 hours walking 3/4 of a mile because they're going to stop at everything, every rock, every shell, every egg, every bone, everything you see, because they're able to discuss it. And it's all interesting and it's all unique to the Galapagos. In many, many cases, you're talking about endemic species and you don't see these anywhere else in the world. And why did they develop there and how did they develop that way? So from a photographer's perspective, a wildlife perspective, anyone who's interested in natural history, in animals, in photography, this is how close you can get to the wildlife. It's none of this is staged. This is literally how close you are. It's an open air zoo. It's an open air living history museum. So whether it's the marine iguanas or the sea lions, the blue-footed boobies, and the giant tortoises, this is how close you get. You're walking among them. And therefore the photography is incredible, and it just, everything comes to life. All of these things you've heard from the time you were a kid and going to school about the Galapagos, you see it firsthand. Kayaking, I just throw it in there again just to mention it. It's a brilliant way to see everything. You're away from the hustle and bustle of the ship. You're a couple of feet off the water, and all the sights and the sounds and the smells are all highlighted and just accentuated. It's that much more right in your face and really, really pleasant. Snorkeling. A lot of people ask about snorkeling. Great opportunities for snorkeling, and we provide all the snorkeling gear. So on the next slide, you'll see the mask,
including the wetsuit, right?
Including the wetsuit. So the mask, the fins, the snorkel, the wetsuit. So what happens is on your first day, you arrive on a Saturday, and after the various mandatory briefings and that sort of thing, you're invited in small groups to go and fit yourself for some gear, and there are expedition team members there to help you fit the gear. Once you've found a mask that fits you and fins and wetsuit that fits you and a snorkel, you put it in a mesh bag. It's got your suite number on it. You hang it up and it's yours to use for the rest of the week. So you don't have to go back fishing through this giant bin of masks. You found one that fits you. It's yours to use for the week. You give it up on Friday. You disembark on Saturday. The next people to use it are not until Sunday. So in that 48-hour period, everything is disinfected.
And about a third of the people actually don't use the wetsuits, at least on my cruise, just to let you know. So
They must be the
you can
Canadians.
stand the cold a little bit, you can do it.
We know this big guy, don't we?
Yeah, it's a perfect destination for kids. This is my son, Alex. We took him almost 2 years ago now, July of 2018. He was 5 at the time. I think a lot of my family said, what are you doing taking a kid that far on a trip? He's never going to remember this trip. He does. He keeps bugging me when we're going back to the Galapagos because as far as he's concerned, we've only seen one half. We need to go back and do the other half. But B, it was about our memories of him. Look at the joy on that kid's face, riding around in his Zodiac and the wind blowing in his hair. He chewed the ear off of every one of the expedition staff. He had so many questions and he followed them. He was the first one right behind him. So it's an amazing destination for kids. From the parents' perspective as well, because 97% of the Galapagos is undeveloped. So when you arrive at one of these beaches or one of these boardwalks where we're about to go take off, there's no marina, there's no yacht club, there are no roads and no cars. So, and the wildlife there doesn't want to bite us or eat us. They're used to us and we just walk among them. So it's a great destination for kids. And what we're starting to see more and more of is multi-generational. We've been talking about this in the travel industry for the last 20 years. And we're seeing it. It's the grandparents and the middle generation and the grandkids. And now what we're starting to see is, and there's a new term for it, gramping, where the grandparents are taking the grandchildren. And there was a couple from the UK on our voyage and 3 granddaughters, each from a different set of parents. So the 3 cousins were hanging out with each other for 10 days on this Ecuador experience. And I spoke to the grandparents about it and they said, listen, we didn't want to give them another iPad or a Fitbit or a video game or a phone. We wanted to give them this experience to, 1, selfishly spend some time with their granddaughters, but 2, to instill a sense of conservation and preservation in them. and also give them this memory that they will take with them for the rest of their lives. And then we've got some really exciting news about the Galapagos, and Joe touched on this as well when he talked about the fleet, and I touched on it as well. The Silver Origin, we took possession last week at a shipyard in the Netherlands, and the very first ship to be handed over post-COVID or mid-COVID. This ship was purposely designed for the Galapagos and built specifically for the Galapagos. She will operate exclusively in the Galapagos. A lot of innovations here with respect to the cleanliness of the ship and the fuel that she burns and how she burns it. We don't have to drop anchor if we don't want to, because she's got thrusters that will keep her in place, something called dynamic positioning. We have a partnership with the Royal Geographical Society in the UK. So these museum-style display cases, things on display here that are on loan from the Royal Geographic Society, including replicas of Darwin's notebooks and Darwin's sketchbooks. And then if you contrast this sort of contemporary way of looking at things with a more, the traditional way with a more contemporary way, that big screen you see there, it's a wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling touchscreen display. I'm calling it the world's largest iPad. All embedded with information about the Galapagos. So still images, videos, but also song, whale song and bird song and things like that. You'll be able to listen to the animals and what their calls are like. So if somebody really wanted to do a deep dive into something, you come back from a visit, you saw a bird that you really, really need to learn more about, you go up to this touchscreen display and just get into it and really start to get into Google at sea, if you will, but all about the Galapagos. This ship was designed with the Galapagos in mind, as I said, and the whole idea was to bring the outdoors in. So everywhere throughout the ship, in the common areas and in the suites, lots and lots of windows, lots and lots of natural light to bring it in. In this observation lounge here, as well as where we're going to have the lectures, believe it or not. So it looks like someone's living room, or it looks like this gorgeous lounge, but with monitors placed all over the room, and we can draw the blinds and make it nice and dark in here. You'll be able to hear the lecturer and not have to spin around and crane your neck and get a stiff neck. You can just watch one of the monitors if you want to and enjoy your cocktail. In the suites as well, plenty of natural light throughout, balconies. Some of them, it's just a matter of the glass lowering to create a balcony, and others are a more traditional balcony. And something that I love, in the next slide, you'll see that the bathroom. So, you know, if you've sailed before, typically you enter your suite and immediately right or immediately left is the bathroom. And there's not a hint of natural light in that bathroom. In these bathrooms, you can slide away the mirror, slide away that panel, and you're standing over the sink brushing your teeth, and you're looking through your suite and through your balcony and looking out to the Galapagos. And if you want to get even closer, in some of the suites, the bathroom is on the other side of the suite. You walk through your suite to get to the other side. And one side of your shower is the edge of the ship, and it's one-way glass, and you're standing there showering basically in the Galapagos, enjoying your one-way glass, and always there feeling like you're right in the middle of things. And that's everything. I didn't want to go too much. I know we're just about, yeah. Thanks, John. I just got your text about the time, so I wanted to be aware of the time. I know we started a little bit late, but wanted to keep it overall to an hour.
Yes, I want to thank you, gentlemen, so very much for bringing the beautiful world of Silversea to life for all of us. People have asked us the same type question: why do you take your children while they're still so young? They'll never remember it. And I think one of the biggest things to answer that question is, as long as they are learning, they remember it. I can take them to a gorgeous hotel and they'll have a blast, but they might not remember it next year. But when they go on these meaningful trips where someone has amazing conversations with them and teaches them about the destination and how to keep the destination pristine, those are lifelong. And one other quick thing I just would like to mention is that while we were on board, the naturalist team in Antarctica was kind enough to meet with our girls, and we had questions from their friends at school, both third and fourth grade, and for over an hour, those naturalists sat and answered question after question, and we videoed it all, and it's up on YouTube, and all the classes just loved watching it and hearing their names and their questions and listening to what the naturalists had to say. So it's definitely a pretty spectacular experience at any age. And like you said, whether they remember it or not, we will. But
They remember.
Our girls remember the Galapagos when they were 3 and 5 as well. So
Yeah.
very cool.
Well, and for those of you that may not be taking kids, please know on the expedition, the kids that go are not needy. They're very,
They're travelers, Ange, right? They're travelers.
they
Yeah.
are. And so they will not be bothering you. They won't be running and screaming. And it's a different kind of kid that does this kind of trip.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're right. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking time from their day to listen to us here today. I hope you learned something about Silversea. I hope we've inspired you on where to go to next. And just remember, if we didn't cover it on today's session, it's on our calendar at some point throughout our itinerary deployment. And I know our friends at Wallace Pierson will help you find it. So we look forward to seeing you on board.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yes,
Joe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
everybody.
great to see everyone. Hope I see you
Good
soon.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Lynn.
Bye.
Bye, Tracy.
Bye.
Bye.